My name is Charlotte Kieshel, and I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the CAD Center, and I'm very excited to welcome you today to the third installment of the Center's lecture series on the genocide concept. As a reminder, this series brings together scholars in history, Jewish studies, and law to examine some of the questions and controversies that have long defined the mobilization of the genocide term. Over the last two lectures, we've broadly speaking focused on two questions. So first, what is the origin story of the genocide term? And second, how have the histories of colonialism and anti-racist advocacy shaped the development of the genocide concept? Today, we're tackling a very different dimension of the genocide term, its deployment on Wikipedia and relationship to online misinformation. To tackle this important and timely subject, we are joined today by our esteemed speaker, Professor Shira Klein, who is Associate Professor of History at Chapman University. Professor Klein's research interests are various, but include Italian Jewry, Jewish migration, the Holocaust, and digital humanities. Her first book, Italy's Jews from Emancipation to Fascism, which was published by Cambridge University Press, was a finalist for the 2018 National Jewish Book Award. She's also been at the vanguard of defining how historians of the Holocaust can deploy the methods of digital humanities. And in this regard, if I may, I do want to highlight an exceptional article that Professor Klein co-authored in the Journal of Genocide Research. By focusing on how a group of anonymous editors, have distorted Wikipedia's Holocaust-related pages, both denying the Holocaust's significance and trafficking in myths of Polish victimization, the article really breaks new ground in demonstrating how scholars of genocide can wield methods of digital history and digital research to their advantage. We live in a world of increasing misinformation and anti-Semitism, and Professor Klein is among the courageous, exploring how scholarship and the academy can respond to our present media environment. Professor Klein, I'll turn things over to you, and I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to speak today about two large-scale distortions on Wikipedia. And one of them is on English Wikipedia, which is the seventh most accessed website in the world. And the misinformation that I found there relates to the Holocaust in Poland. And it is a mostly resolved problem, I would say, the problem on Wikipedia. And I've published about this, so I'll speak more about that in a second. The other distortion that I will speak about is on Hebrew Wikipedia, and the misinformation there relates to Palestinian-Israeli history, to Gaza, to international law. And this is an ongoing problem. It is not resolved. And it is also an ongoing research project in the sense that I still have not published about it. I'm still working on it. So a few words first about how I got into this research, because it's pretty unusual kind of research, and particularly for a historian. And my previous research, as Dr. Kieshel mentioned, was a very traditional history of something pretty unrelated, and that is Italian Jewry. And this was my first book. It is just basically a monograph of Italian Jewish history and under fascism. But I had been teaching for a while. It's been over a decade now that I've been teaching using Wikipedia. And basically what I had been doing was in all of my courses, whether I was teaching on European Jewish history or Israel-Palestine or migration history, all of these areas I teach in, I had been teaching students to edit Wikipedia as a pedagogical assignment. So I oversaw a total of 200 students who added a combined 70,000 words. And basically, I would have students pick a topic that they were passionate about, and then they would have little assignments like this one over here. They would need to find reliable secondary sources. on their topic. So basically peer-reviewed sources that had been published with a reputable press. And then I would have them find an article on Wikipedia that they could improve with the secondary sources that they had chosen. And then they would go into the article's talk page. Every article has a talk page, which is not public facing. Anyone can access it, but it doesn't show up on any Google search. And they could announce to the community of editors what they planned to edit, and they could go in and make those edits. So one day in 2018, a student of mine called George told me that for his Wikipedia assignment, he wanted to write about Jewish life in post-war Poland. And he and I picked out a book called Fear by Jan Gross. And Gross is professor emeritus at Princeton University. His book came out with Princeton University Press. So this was a reliable source. He's widely considered one of the top authorities of our time on Polish Jewish history. And George put in a remark on the talk page of the article, the Wikipedia article that he was planning to edit, that he was going to be using this source. And both he and I expected that it would just go like any other Wikipedia assignment that my students had been submitting for years, that his edits would go unopposed and he would manage to do it and get the grade and end of story. Instead, within hours, this anonymous user or editor called XX236 posted an angry rebuttal and scoffed at the book's reliability and hinted that post-war anti-Semitism was actually the fault of the Jews. And I was taken aback by these accusations, and I weighed in. And I said, we're using this reliable source, and other editors weighed in, and a whole debate followed, back and forth, pages of this debate. By this point, George probably regretted ever having taken my class. But this incident served as a warning bell for me that something was amiss on Wikipedia. Like, how was it that editors were allowing this to happen, or were behaving this way? And I later discovered that this was the tip of an iceberg, and that there was a whole group of editors advancing a distorted narrative of Polish history in multiple articles. So I sought out Dr. Jan Grabowski, who is an expert on Poland, and he had also noticed some distortions on Wikipedia. And the two of us decided to combine our respective strengths. He holds this immense expertise in Polish history and historiography. And I had, by this point, begun to get to know this, what I call this vast underbelly of Wikipedia that most people don't know about or are unaware exists. And I should note that by this point, it was the middle of the pandemic. I had 3 kids under the age of 5, so I didn't have much time, but I pretty much spent every free minute I had diving into Wikipedia's behind the scenes. Again, this vast space that most people don't know exists. And it's a very important space because it is a space that where editors on Wikipedia, also known as Wikipedians, negotiate daily what the rest of the world will know or think they know, right? And not necessarily know. So bit by bit, I developed a methodology for analyzing Wikipedia. And I scoured nearly 300 back pages. And these are some examples of how I approached it, or what back pages. So notice boards over here up above, these are places on Wikipedia where editors ask questions and request assistance. Then we've got arbitration cases right here. This is where they take their most serious disputes and ask for some kind of arbitration. Then we've got history logs. This is the bread and butter for anyone researching Wikipedia. It's these scary looking logs that look like that. And basically anything ever written on Wikipedia remains somewhere in its back pages forever and ever. And I mined these back pages to find the origins of certain statements. So let's say I found a wrong statement, I could see just when it was inserted. Or if I could see in a certain past, for a certain past date that there had been a statement and it had been removed, I could see exactly who removed it down to the hour, right, and the day. So, so then the difference between any two pages on Wikipedia, or every time somebody makes a difference, it'll manifest as this thing called a diff, where you can see information added in blue. And again, you can see exactly who made the difference down to the time and the date. And then, in addition to that, I also interviewed a dozen or so editors, and I gleaned data from Wikipedia's statistical tools, which look like this. So you can see a lot of information about page histories, about edits, how many edits this or that user makes, and so on and so forth. And the distortions that I found along with Dr. Grabowski they're important, they matter. And the reason that they matter is because the Wikipedia articles we looked at receive thousands of views every month. So if you take a look at this this slide, you can see that, well, the article on the Holocaust gets really a tremendous number of views, but even the one that has the fewest views, like Rescue of Jews by Poles During the Holocaust, that is still over 1,000 views a month. That's more than any of us academics could ever hope to have, right? And the academics in the room will know, right? We have a pretty modest readership. And so Wikipedia really does get a lot of views. And it's often the first and last point of reference in people's quest for information. And sometimes people don't even know they're getting their information from Wikipedia because they get it from the Google search box or they get it from AI. But AI often trains on Wikipedia's content. So for example, if I ask Google, what is an apple, right? AI will respond, right? So you get the AI response, and you can see that it directly corresponds to the two Wikipedia articles on Apple, right? The actual fruit, and then the company Apple. So AI trains on many sources, but one big one is Wikipedia. So really, what was written on Wikipedia is forked out and mirrored out in so many other outlets that it is incredibly important in the sense of shaping what people know, or again, what they think they know. So what were the distortions that we found? We found a narrative that whitewashed the role of Polish Holocaust society in Polish society in the Holocaust, and that bolstered stereotypes about Jews. And we're not really talking about Holocaust denial, and I'll explain this in just one second. We're talking about distortion. We're talking about taking a grain of truth and inflating it, or taking something very central and minimizing it. So, for example, in the article on collaboration, this one over here in German occupied Poland, which was about collaboration with the Nazis during World War II, there had been, at the time that we were researching this, there had been a huge section on Jewish collaboration with the Nazis. The editors of this Wikipedia page had taken a very marginal phenomenon of a Jewish gang during World War II, which had really existed. I think it was in the Warsaw Ghetto. And they inflated it so that Jewish collaboration took up most of the space on the page, right? So it's not that the things that they wrote there were necessarily untrue, but that it took up such a large proportion of the page that it would seem that Jewish collaboration was the central form of collaboration in World War II Europe, or Poland, which of course it was not. And many editors tried to fix these distortions. Some of these distortions were on Wikipedia for over a decade. But anyone daring to challenge it found themselves face to face with a group of editors who I have listed over here, who have playful usernames, right? Like Gizzy Cat Bella or Volunteer Marek, but they were actually a really resilient team. There was nothing cute about them. And they both guarded old distortions and they produced new ones. And so methodically and patiently, they went from article to article. And I've listed some of the articles over here, and you can see their dominance in these articles, right? So all but the gray are these just what I call the distortionist editors, and you can see how dominant they are in these articles. Some of them really editing, more than half or responsible for more than half of the content, and even in those with less, responsible for almost half of the content. So really dominant. And they went from article to article, removing and adding content until it aligned with their worldview. And again, their worldview was, or the kind of narrative that kept being pushed was a minimization of the role of Poles during the Holocaust, and a tendency to advance stereotypes about Jews. For example, the idea that Jews were all Bolshevist or all communist, right? The Judeo-Bolshevist threat, which was a trope in anti-Semitism in Europe. And so one of the ways that they did this was to push fringe points of view and present them as though they were mainstream. And one example is work by this scholar called Richard Lukacs. And his work on Holocaust history has been scathingly critiqued by mainstream academia. And you can see that he's cited very little on Google Scholar compared to some of the top names in the field, like Doris Bergen, Samuel Casso, Tzvi Gittelman, Deborah Dwork, Nechama Tech. He's not cited as much on Wikipedia, on Google Scholar. And to give you an example of why he's being so critiqued, take a look at this quote down here at the bottom, where he wrote that the number of Jews hiding in Poland and helped in some way by Poles ran into the hundreds of thousands. Now, anyone who knows a little bit of Polish Jewish history knows that no more than 30,000 Jews out of more than 3 million Jews in Poland survived the war and the occupation, the German occupation on Polish territory, right? And many of these survived without Polish help. So to argue that hundreds of thousands of Jews found shelter in Polish homes is just nonsensical. Right? Again, because only 30,000 actually survived the war and the occupation on Polish territory. So not surprising, he hasn't cited much on Google compared to some of the top names in the field. But then take a look at this chart on the right, showing his citations on Wikipedia. You can see over there his citations are really high. And why are they really high? Because of these distortionist editors who kept inserting his work left, right, and center. So Dr. Gorofsky and we analyzed example after example, article after article. I think we looked at 24 public-facing articles and 300 back pages, such as talk pages or arbitration pages or notice boards, things like that. And we found these kind of distortions appeared over and over again in Wikipedia. And we then basically wrote a 60-page article about it, which we published in a peer-reviewed paper. And this story has a good ending. Our article went viral. We made sure that it would be open access, right? Meaning that people wouldn't have to pay for it. And within a couple of weeks, it had been viewed by thousands of people. Now it is standing at 73,000 views and counting, and that's a lot for an academic paper. It was reported on in newspapers in the US, Germany, Poland, Russia, Norway, Israel, France, Italy, Sweden, and Belgium. And it's been ranked by Altmetric, which is an online visibility counter in the top 5% of I think it was 25 million research outputs. So it really got a lot of attention, and that was a good thing. And there's a saying, right, sunshine is the best disinfectant. And this was really the case with our research, because we shone a light on the problem and it caught the attention of Wikipedians. More and more editors came to these articles. and they removed most of the glaring problems. So the articles got cleaned up, and not to say that they've all disappeared, but they're in a much, much better condition now than they had been before our articles. So that's a really nice ending to this story. There's always the chance that these distortions will come back, but there is now a larger group of editors watching these articles, and so I think that the chances of that are fairly small. So moving on now to Hebrew Wikipedia. And this pertains to this new research that I'm doing, which is still ongoing. So for Hebrew Wikipedia, I use the exact same methodology as I did for English Wikipedia. Here, as there, I've been looking at how Wikipedia's content veers far from scholarly consensus. And if it veers far, right, then that suggests to me that there is a distortion. The other thing I'm looking for is when the same false content appears over and over in multiple pages. And the third thing, again, that I found in the English Wikipedia is when there are editors who try to fix the problem and they encounter constant opposition. So these are the three things that I found in English Wikipedia, and I've started looking at Hebrew Wikipedia to see to what degree those things are happening. And just like with English Wikipedia, Hebrew Wikipedia matters, right? It too very much matters in shaping public opinion. It has a lot of traffic. And for example, if you Google the word settlement in Hebrew, which is itnachlut, the first thing that pops up in Google is the Hebrew Wikipedia article on the settlements, right? So Wikipedia shows up in Google searches in Hebrew, in the first hit or one of the first hits. And of course, in absolute numbers, English Wikipedia has vastly more views than Hebrew Wikipedia on any given article. But if you compare Hebrew Wikipedia and English Wikipedia in relative terms, relative to the size of the population in the world that speaks English or Hebrew as a native language, then the visibility of Hebrew Wikipedia actually surmounts those on parallel articles in the English Wikipedia. So let's say if you look at the Hebrew Wikipedia article on settlements, it has more views in relation to how many Hebrew speakers or Hebrew readers, native Hebrew speakers there are, than the English Wikipedia has in relation to English native speakers. And same thing goes for the Wikipedia article on West Bank, and the same thing goes for the Wikipedia article on Palestinians. So Hebrew Wikipedia, what does the distortion there look like? Again, after looking at article after article after article, what I've found is that Hebrew Wikipedia systematically distorts content on Israel and Palestine in a way that directly contradicts scholarly consensus. And the way it does this, or I'll give a few examples of how it does this. So one central example is its coverage, is Hebrew Wikipedia's coverage of the history of settlements in the West Bank and in Gaza. And so in terms of the scholarly consensus, scholars are in consensus that Israel's settlements are in clear violation of international law. And to simplify, but it really is fairly straightforward, the rationale is that in 1967, Israel occupied areas beyond the 1949 armistice lines, also known as the Green Line, above all, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. And therefore, these areas constitute occupied territory, right? Israel occupied it, therefore it is occupied territory. The Fourth Geneva Convention, which is over here, states that an occupying country may not transfer its population into the occupied territory. The settlements, the Jewish settlements are exactly that, right? Where the occupiers transferred population into the occupied area. and ergo, the settlements violate international law. And there really is this overwhelming, and I'm just quoting one legal scholar now, there is an overwhelming and rare international legal consensus that the territories are occupied and that the law of belligerent occupation applies and that the settlement are illegal and indeed constitute a grave breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention, end quote. So there's this broad agreement by scholars and by the international community. The UN General Assembly has issued over 200 decisions referring to the West Bank as occupied territory. 77 of these mention violations of the Fourth Geneva Convention, and the same goes for the UN Security Council and the UN International Court of Justice, and so on and so forth. Israel's control of the West Bank is declared illegal by countries including the UK, Ireland, Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, France, the US, with the exception of a couple of the recent administrations in the US, not to mention the European Union. So this is kind of the consensus. Now let's go ahead and see what the Hebrew Wikipedia says. The article called Settlement was begun in 2004, shortly after Hebrew Wikipedia came into existence. And even in its earliest incarnation, it refrained from using the term occupied. Instead, it stated that the settlements were in areas that were captured. So over here it says Ezorim shenitpesu, and I've just kind of translated it over here, in areas captured by Israel, right? So even then, it didn't have much on the occupation. But as the years passed, editors changed even that. And by today, they avoid not only any mention of the occupied territories, but also they have removed any mention of the Green Line. And they changed the term captured, nitpesu, to held, muhzakim. So now you see, בשטחים המוחזקים על ידי ישראל, which means areas held by Israel. And that even more erases this act of seizure. A similar process of erasure and distortion occurs in Hebrew Wikipedia's discussion of what international law says about the settlements. So again, early on in the article's existence in 2006, just a few years after Hebrew Wikipedia was born, editors acknowledged that most experts in international law and most countries in the world consider the territories, the occupied territories, occupied by Israel, right? And here's a quote over here. Most experts in international law, most countries in the world, for them, the status is territories occupied by Israel, right? And again, over here, most of the international community has stood against the settlements. And then the article went on to mention this fringe opinion that Israel is actually lawfully controlling the West Bank, but presented it as just that, a fringe opinion or a minority opinion. As the years passed, editors shrank the portion of the text on how the settlements violate international law to about 80 words, right? This is what you have now in the leading paragraph. And they expanded the fringe opinion, this insistence on the legality of the settlements, to over 100 words. So now we get the impression from Wikipedia that these two opinions, right, settlements are illegal or settlements are legal, enjoy an equivalence. And the other thing that happened was that editors watered down the phrase most experts in international law to the far less conclusive phrase in the international community. So little by little, bit by bit, these changes were made until you get this portrayal now where you could say they're equivalent or even This fringe opinion even takes up more space. And so this is where the distortion comes in. The same distortion arises in the article in Hebrew Wikipedia entitled The Fourth Geneva Convention. So this is the Wikipedia article in Hebrew Wikipedia that deals with a convention, and out of 320 words regarding Israel's compliance with the Fourth Geneva Convention, only 40 words note the position of jurists and of the international community, right? So only this slice, right, this proportion of the part of the article that speaks about Israel and how the Fourth Geneva Convention applies to Israel, only that is the slice of the pie that notes the mainstream position. The other 280 words, right, which is this much larger slice of the pie, list Israel's justifications for not violating the Geneva Convention, right? List Israel's claim that it is doing nothing to violate the Geneva Convention. And editors tried over the years to insert more reliable information, but they have had their edits challenged time and again. And I'll just give a couple of examples over here. This is a diff showing that the article used to say that on the one side was Israel, on the other side was the rest of the countries in the world, right? There is a disagreement between Israel and the rest of the countries. And an editor, right, you can see when it was the 19th of June, 2023, an editor removed the phrase, the rest of the countries, so that you get a kind of general disagreement, and it's not quite clear between who. It seems like it's between these two equal sides. These people say that thing, and these other people say that thing. And another example of this is here again a removal of a word. That the article had stated there are few foreign legal scholars who support this stand, meaning Israel's stand, and the editor removed the word few, so that what you get are there are foreign legal scholars who support Israel's stand, right? And again, there really are very, very few, and they are from years and years ago, a couple decades ago. And the formidable consensus today among jurists is that Israel's settlements is indeed violating international law. Some other examples of how this distortion manifests is the attempts of some editors to point out these problems and the fact that other editors have ignored it. So one editor wrote in June 2023 that the article on settlements was creating the false impression that the dispute is being waged between camps of equal size, and therefore it violates our rule, the Wikipedia rule that you must accurately present the relative importance of opposing opinions, right? So this was an editor who picked up on exactly what I'm showing you all here, which is that there is an attempt on Hebrew Wikipedia to show an equivalence between two sides that doesn't really exist. What does exist is a fringe opinion and a mainstream opinion. But on Hebrew Wikipedia, it becomes, it looks like they're two equal sides. And this argument was just completely ignored by other editors, and the editor who inserted this argument was eventually banned from Wikipedia. Moving on to a more current example, and that pertains to the genocide that is happening right now in Gaza. And so the article that I wanted to show in this regard is entitled Hunger in the Gaza Strip during this current war. And The lead section of this article is this length, right? This is the lead section. This is the section that will show up on Google. This is the section that will most train AI. This is the section that has the most visibility. It's called the lead. And the paragraph in the lead section, there is a paragraph over here that states Israel's approach, which is to deny the existence of hunger in Gaza. And throughout the article, this approach is repeated to the point that 13% of the article actually either questions or denies that there is starvation in Gaza. Not to mention who is responsible for the starvation. So the majority of this article is written in the passive voice and presents simply hunger as opposed to the active starvation. And even despite the fact that 13% of the article questions or denies starvation, still editors saw fit to add a banner. And this would be this banner over here. In its previous iteration, it was even more detailed, saying that the article was one-sided and ignored Hamas's role in the crisis. So this was added in March 2024. Later, it was rewritten, and this banner currently reads that it is simply unneutral or non-neutral. And this is again an example of something that simply goes against the consensus of scholarship to the extent that it exists, but of really mainstream newspapers, the majority of humanitarian organizations, and the UN and other similar agencies who declare really clearly and show really clearly and provide a lot of data showing that there is mass starvation in Gaza. On Hebrew Wikipedia, it becomes more of a claim to be countered by this counterclaim. So, in conclusion, there is a growing consensus, and I know that the CAT Center has hosted speakers before me and will host speakers after me speaking about this more than I am, that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. And just the other day, Dr. Raz Segal published a piece in The Guardian arguing pretty persuasively that it is still doing so. Among Israelis, there is a minimization, an omission, and sometimes an outright denial of Israel's crimes in Gaza. And these distortions rest on an entire establishment of minimization, again, omission or denial of a much larger history that far predates what is happening in Gaza and international law more generally. So articles that I've been looking at, in addition, right, well, I kind of did a deep dive in this talk on the history of the settlements, but other articles include 1948, include the term Palestinians, right, and it's the erasure of the term Palestinians, the erasure of the term West Bank, and its replacement with the term Judea and Samaria, and international law more generally. I would say in conclusion that Hebrew Wikipedia both mirrors and bolsters these distortions. It mirrors them in that Wikipedia didn't invent these distortions. Wikipedian and editors are reflecting the reality that they are experiencing, right? The information that they are consuming through media, through their social media, through what they have chosen to read. And it also bolsters these distortions, again, because Wikipedia is so very visible and feeds AI. Hebrew Wikipedia is similar to the Polish case in English Wikipedia in that respect, but it is different from the Polish case in that it is not just a tiny group of editors. And in Hebrew Wikipedia, as opposed to what I call this happy ending in English Wikipedia, I don't think we will see these distortions go away anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Klein. So lots to dig in there. I invite everyone to pose their questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and I'll maybe begin with a few from the Q&A from our audience. So one is about kind of the relationship between Wikipedia and the editors. Professor Klein, I was wondering if you could say more about if any of the Wikipedia editors receive remuneration, what's the relationship between the editors and the Wikipedia organization? And then how are editors, banned from Wikipedia? So what kind of sticks, if you will, does Wikipedia have to define the shape of the conversation on both Hebrew or English Wikipedia?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, so there are various rules on Wikipedia as far as conflicts of interest and payment for editing. And so the general rule of thumb is that you are supposed to edit because you are interested in the subject matter or it is important to you. You're not supposed to edit because somebody is paying you. And I think that is probably the case for most editors, both on English Wikipedia and on Hebrew Wikipedia, and actually all the other dozens of Wikipedias in other languages. Certainly, when we worked on the Polish case, we found no evidence that any of these editors were being paid. It seemed that they were just really passionate about this topic. And, on both sides, both what we call the distortionist editors and those who were trying to correct them, we didn't see any evidence of that. I think some people are very, very passionate about what information goes online. And this is a kind of a sort of special sort of community. People develop relationships on Wikipedia with other editors, and they grow very attached to the articles that they write. They kind of take ownership of them almost. And I could see that with my students in other areas as well. Whenever a student of mine would edit an article, there would be watchers, page watchers, who would, check what they had done and see how it affected the article and that kind of thing. So that's as far as payment. And then the process for getting editors banned is different on every Wikipedia. English Wikipedia has one process and Hebrew Wikipedia has another one. And in general, there is both community feedback that goes into it, and there is a more top-down process for doing that. But even the top-down process is all done by editors who are volunteers. Some editors, however, who are volunteers, have more privileges than others. In English, they're called administrators and arbitrators, and in Hebrew, they're called mafilim and birokratim, which would translate roughly into, I guess, administrators and bureaucrats. And so there are different hierarchies in each Wikipedia and different rules as far as how long somebody can be blocked or banned. But in general, the Wikimedia Foundation never intervenes in content or even in blocking or banning. It leaves it up to the community, and those volunteers with the extra privileges are ones that have been elected by the community, not designated from the Wikimedia Foundation, right? They're all elected democratically.
Great, thank you. Another question about method from one of our audience members is, so it seems that you're deploying close reading in your analysis of both Hebrew and English Wikipedia, and there's obviously considerable advantage to that. Could you just speak a little bit more about the merits and faults of doing a more automated methods for similar types of analysis? I imagine with AI or digital scrapes. So what would be some of the alternative methods that individuals such as yourself would deploy? And then maybe could you comment a little bit about how you would to the extent to which you think some of these methods should be part and parcel of historical and scholarly training. You had to do a lot of work, it seems like, during the pandemic with 3 kids to kind of teach yourself the back end of Wikipedia. To what extent do historians of the Holocaust and genocide more generally need to be up on these methods, if you will?
Yeah. Um, those are two very good questions. So the first one about method and the pros and cons of doing close reading. So I think that, I mean, yeah, close reading is kind of my bread and butter as a historian, right? And particularly if you do traditional archival research, you that's what you do. You do close reading, and I think it's very powerful. What I did with the Polish research was also some larger data analysis, and I'm doing that for this one as well. And I have some colleagues who are helping me. For instance, we did a large sweep analysis, which I kind of touched on very briefly, of the usage of the word West Bank versus Judea and Samaria. And so we managed to take like a slice in time of every year since Hebrew Wikipedia started. Every year at around the same time, we ran we kind of developed, or my colleague developed a program with the help of AI that would run through the entirety of Hebrew Wikipedia and count the instances of how many times the word Judea and Samaria was used, how many times West Bank was used, and we managed to come up with this really nice graph that shows very visibly that with time the word West Bank is being replaced by Judea and Samaria, right? Which is a very important distinction. So the distinction itself is kind of a close reading one, but then the research on this more numerical data or quantitative data is less of a close reading, and so I think the trick is to arrive at both, and I'm grateful for colleagues who help me do that, because I'm definitely, my strengths are more close reading, but with the help of more quantitative minded colleagues, I can do more than that. Um, and then Dr. Kiesel, can you remind me of the other question?
Yeah, how would you, I mean, you've obviously as a historian had to combine skills in digital history, but also close
Oh,
reading. So if you could kind of imagine a future for Holocaust studies and Jewish
yeah,
studies in terms of what we put in our toolkits for analysis, what would what would they
yeah.
include?
Yeah, I wish more scholars would do this. And I actually had a grant application in the pipeline for the National Endowment for the Humanities to teach this kind of workshop to more scholars, be they Holocaust scholars or any scholars really in the humanities. Um, but as you may or may not know, the current Trump administration gutted the National Endowment for the Humanities, so that never went anywhere. But there is a sharp learning curve, and most Holocaust historians are not trained on this. Neither was I, right? Again, I just kind of stumbled across it, and one thing led to another, and now I possess this kind of I don't know if to call it skill, or I've developed this methodology, but there are very few others who have. I have a colleague who works on environmental history and indigenous studies, and he carried out very similar research on English Wikipedia and its distortion of indigenous history using the same method. So that was really exciting. But I think there's a lot of space for others to join, and I would be thrilled to see that happening.
Great. The another question from our chat has to do with time, and one of the remarkable observations you made during your presentation about Hebrew Wikipedia concerned the disjuncture, if you will, between the 2004 Wikipedia pages and those in 2025. Could you just speak a little bit about why you think there have been those changes within that time frame? Obviously, there's the ongoing war, but what happened? Is there a way to isolate what happened between 2004 and 2014? Is there a way to kind of periodize that those transformations a little bit more cleanly?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, I think there is. And of course, for this talk, which was, so short, I gave these snapshots of 2 points in time. But basically, what I do is I go through the history logs. So let's say I choose a couple dozen articles, right? Settlements is one, Palestinians is one, the War of 1948 is one, right? So any number of articles, and I will look through the history log of each and every one of them from the moment it started until the present day. And the present day, of course, keeps shifting, right? So when I give this presentation, I keep having to update it because it's like a dynamic archive, right? It's a live document. Wikipedia, it's constantly changing. Um, but yeah, and then what I do is I keep track of like when are these points in time when there are these large shifts, and certainly in the last 2 years there's been a large shift, but I would say even before that I would say the mid-teens, so like 2014, 2016, you see these shifts taking place, and I think it corresponds. I mean, that I haven't yet sort of reasoned like what happens in these points of time, right? So far I'm just uh, making a chronology of and chronicling what the changes are, and not why they're happening at this time. But if I had to if I had to give a hypothesis, it would be that it is running in parallel a certain to a certain trend in Israeli politics that is moving rightwards. Um, and yeah, so that's how I would explain probably the change across time. In Wikipedia, also on a more local level, editors who are more aligned with the scholarly consensus are constantly being pushed out and banned and blocked. So there are very few of them left. And that is another reason why I think why I'm less hopeful that this is going to have a near happy ending.
Could you speak a little bit about the relationship between Hebrew Wikipedia and English Wikipedia? It seems like they're totally independent from one another. So if, maybe elaborate on that, and just as a historian, how are these source bases dramatically different from one another? Um,
Yeah, they are dramatically different from one another. I think that's a very astute point. And there is the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the umbrella organization um, overseeing, I wouldn't even say overseeing, but that sort of stands, I guess you could say, above it. It is the one that has or is hosting the servers of Wikipedia, right? And and it is based in the US. And then there are all of these different language Wikipedias who are all independent, and they have their own foundations as well that run them, who answer to the Wikimedia Foundation, but not in the same way, right? In different relationships. Um, and the Wikimedia Foundation is adamant about not interfering and not intervening in Wikipedias. And I think overall that is a really good thing. Um, just as it is adamant about not interfering in content, I think overall that it is a good thing, because the whole magic of Wikipedia is that it is a grassroots project. And people often think that I'm anti-Wikipedia, and I am actually not. I think to discredit the entirety of Wikipedia is to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think Wikipedia is an absolutely fantastic project in that it democratizes knowledge like never before, and it leads to vast new forms of knowledge and of chronicling of minority groups who never before would have had the space for this. Um, and so yeah, that was kind of long-winded answer to how English Wikipedia and Hebrew Wikipedia relate to one another. But yeah, overall, they're just very independent of one another. And the reason their coverage on different topics is so different is because their editors are just very, very different people.
mm, mm. Um, I guess maybe a little bit more of a high level question, which would be, how do you see Wikipedia and kind of editors of Wikipedia responding to this AI moment and this misinformation moment? How can the Wikimedia Foundation potentially change the conversation or landscape in terms of accessing verifiable information about what's going on in Israel and Gaza, but also other forms of information and kind of contested genocides and wars?
That's a hard one. I, you know, it's it's like uncharted terrain. And it's changing so quickly that it's almost like asking someone in a very fast moving train to describe what they're seeing out the window, right? By the time you try to describe it, you've moved on to something else. And I think we're all kind of grappling with what AI now means for us. Um, as far as I can see, and again, there are studies that are coming out, in real time, and so this is very much like a work in progress or figuring out the answer to this question. But as far as I can see, um, Wikipedia is central to AI.
Mm.
And so what is on Wikipedia is incredibly crucial, right? So even though people may be opening Wikipedia less now than they used to, because they're opening browsers less now than they used to, because they're asking AI everything, um, Wikipedia still plays a huge role in what we're actually consuming through AI. Um, yeah, I think there are various conversations between editors on whether you can use AI to edit Wikipedia, because then you can have a kind of a scary little sort of circularity, right? Where AI draws on Wikipedia, which draws on AI, which draws on Wikipedia. And really, my answer to that is, the thing that I think is most important to teach our students, and I'm speaking now as an educator, right, who's going to go teach in a few minutes, is critical thinking, right?
Mm.
And the value of peer-reviewed research and the value of expertise in a time and age when expertise is really being shot down in the kind of like anti-intellectual and anti-elite fashion right now. But yeah, the idea of critical thinking, the idea of using reliable sources to back up everything you can say, right? That is really my answer to AI in the current moment. But again, it's a really good question. It's a scary question, and it's a question that I think we're going to be asking for a while now.